Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, look, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe I won't be here. How do you know? This isn't, we can't be sure. We should have to wait. You should wait until you count how many people are in front of the microphone. Hi. Good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, November 4th, 2020, and we have to do a show. And just like last time, we are a little bit at a loss as to how to actually conduct ourselves here. But I guess we can begin by reminding you, I don't know, we've spent the last couple days, weeks, maybe more, saying, remember, the vote count will take longer than ever before, and you wait, and you don't make pronouncements about what happened until all the vote counting is done, and then you can try to figure out what happened. And we all absorbed this lesson. And then last night, I don't know, I guess we went on Twitter and we talked to other people, and that was a huge mistake because, I don't know, the world went crazy. As I was watching things happen via Twitter, it sort of looked to me like, I guess everybody just, I don't know, they panicked and threw everything out the window. And we didn't, unify and hold together and say, yes, we'll wait for the results to be counted. Then some people panicked, and then we all said, no, look, remember that we said we weren't going to do this. That guy is panicking. Don't listen to that guy. That guy is saying we lost. Oh my God, we lost. It was very weird. Now, of course, in reality, there's still plenty of us sitting here saying, no, this is just what we said was going to happen. And I guess you could occupy yourself otherwise by trying to figure out who are the real people out there who have lost faith in the preparations that we made and are freaking out for real, and who are the Russian bots or whatever, or, just trolling Republicans who are out there saying the opposite, so that, lots of people are saying the opposite thing. And, all right, well, I think we'll be able to straighten out. Thankfully, we have the radio show where we can all gather and talk to people who are following the game plan and are calmer of mind. And I think that largely, I don't know, I mean, I guess it's annoying. This much we can share, right? This much we all share. It's annoying that it wasn't obvious immediately that the whole country truly deep down thinks that Donald Trump is a dangerous idiot maniac, and he was overwhelmingly repudiated. That wasn't likely to happen and didn't happen, I don't think. However, still every chance in the world without having to grasp at straws that when the vote is counted, it's going to be okay in terms of who wins the presidency. At the very least, Joe Biden will have won, and very well may have won fairly convincingly. I thought one of the better points being made to reassure everybody last night, no, remember the plan, stick to it, this was the plan going into 2018 as well. And then everybody freaked out and said, what happened to the blue wave? I thought there was supposed to be a blue wave. And then after the counting was done, there kind of was a blue wave. And now the sad part is that the narrative had already been written. And I guess my biggest disappointment so far has been kind of exactly what we thought we might see. Although I guess I thought that perhaps this time, because it's logical, and that's my big mistake, because it's logical, I thought that the media and journalists would be able to absorb their own story, learn the lesson that they were supposedly teaching people going into this election, and sit and wait calmly, and then they didn't do it. I don't know. I'm seeing already Karen Tumulty tweeting this morning, basically, well, that's the last time I ever trust pollsters. They got it wrong twice in a row. And of course, the last 4 years for us has been about, they really didn't get it wrong the first time around. There was a bit of a black swan event in that, there were mistakes. Pollsters never nail it exactly down to the individual vote ever anywhere. And yeah, there was an over focus on national polls, but obviously the state polls would have told the story. The weird thing was that only 77,000 votes, which is not something you're ever going to be able to buckle down with polling, went in ways that were unaccounted for and unexpected and changed the electoral vote outcome. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I thought there would be perhaps more faith in the idea that if you just wait and see, you will, like last time, eventually come around to the conclusion that the polling largely was right. But I don't know. Karen Tumblety says, no, it's all over. A lot of mainstream, this is one of the problems with monitoring things on Twitter, as you say, a lot of people saying, and one, many of them are fake and not real people. And two, the illusion of seeing two or three prominent people say something and then saying, well, a lot of people are saying, and it's really kind of random even among the media figures. So anyway, Karen Tumblety, I guess, reaching the conclusion for whatever reason that I'm never listening to pollsters again. I saw Matthew Dowd, who I don't listen to in any other situation, though turning more vote-fixing conspiracy theorist. He's deeply disturbed by the results in the Rio Grande Valley counties of Texas. And this is a hot topic as well, where a very large we'll say Latine because we like that term better than the unpronounceable Latinx. The Latine population apparently, allegedly, went for Trump, and people are having a hard time explaining that. And Dowd is actually kind of out there like, I think the vote totals are wrong. I think the numbers got either misreported or manipulated, which is a remarkable thing to be hinting at. I don't think he's saying it outright. I'm going to have to go back and take a look and grab up his tweets, and it's not normally stuff I listen to, so it wasn't immediately at hand this morning. I was just sort of surprised to see it. But I did see other journalists saying, what are you implying here, by the way? He's an odd duck, and I don't know what to make of him. But Karen Tumblety, I like her better. I don't know. I'll open up her tweet stream on the laptop and see if we can't comb through what she's been up to and what she's been saying, so we can get a better sense of whether we're reading her right or not. But I don't know. Greg Dworkin, of course, he'll be here, and he's gathering up his stories, and we'll watch his calmer take on things. Let me offer you this. I did see Mark Sumner tweeting this morning, and I think I can grab his tweet for you. But basically saying, again, follow the plan, wait it out, let the counting be done. In the end, you will find that it is as it was predicted. As he says half an hour ago, for those still asking, how can it be so close? The answer is it's not. It's just that the roadblocks that Republicans have planted for counting early votes have made it look scary overnight. Biden will end up winning, Mark predicts, by a larger popular vote margin than Clinton, and somewhere over 300 electoral votes. It's all possible. I did see, for instance, a tweet, and I think I actually did capture this one and put it aside, that Joe Biden has surpassed Barack Obama in terms of the most votes ever received by a candidate in a U.S. presidential election, which also stands to reason. We are a larger population. It was very good turnout. And it doesn't mean anything by itself. You get a little certificate, maybe. I don't know. You can hang it on the wall, possibly suitable for framing. But truth is, it's a remarkable achievement, and it'll make Donald Trump jealous and angry, and he'll deny that it's actually true. So we hang on and wait, which was the plan. And quite honestly, enough states look to be exactly where they were thought to be, both in the polling and in their pace of counting, that there's no reason to get upset and get panicky. But as we've also told everybody 100 times, that's the thing we do. Even if we train ourselves to say we're not going to do it this time. I guess it's a thing we do. I guess the thing I don't understand is the number of prominent journalists who made themselves obvious last night, not learning that lesson and not applying that lesson to themselves, and it was difficult to understand why they would do that. Maybe Greg knows. He's here. You can hear him in the background clicking, putting numbers into computer machines. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
Good morning. Can you hear all of that?
I hear some clicking. That's okay. It's very official sounding, so it's good.
Oh, good. Good.
Don't worry.
Yeah, that's Abby typing away. She's keeping notes for me, which I think is really important.
Okay, right. Polling the garbage men and everything.
Yeah, trying to look stuff up as I go along here. So, obviously a lot to talk about, but I think that one of the big things is there's a lot of big things to talk about. Who's going to wind up being in the White House? I think it's going to be Joe Biden. I'll make my case why.
Okay.
It's 2020, so nobody should insist on everything. We'll talk about the polls and what was right and what was wrong, and there were things that were right, and there were things that were very, very wrong, and importantly wrong.
Aha. Okay.
And we'll talk about heart versus head in terms of how we look at this election. So maybe we'll start with that. As somebody pointed out to me, the best thing for Democrats would be, and this is impossible, but the best thing for Democrats would be to have the election in such a way that it's counted from left to right, from West Coast to East Coast.
Okay.
Because you'd get the same result, but by the time you got to Florida, you wouldn't be an emotional wreck.
Yes. Florida is a bit of a wreck.
Florida's a bit of a wreck, so a lot of important things happened in Florida. And, if you start with Florida, then, it's always going to break your heart, and then that just sets the stage for the entire rest of the evening. And that's what happens. And it happened with DeSantis and Gillum, and it happened here, and it happened in 2016. And so, that's one of those things where you could say, well, it always happens, and I'll tell myself not to do it, and then it happens anyway.
Yeah, well, right. Like, I shouldn't eat that ice cream because
Yeah, something like that. I mean, we talked about it on the show. Forget about the polls in Florida. We know Florida's a 1 or 2 point state. Turned out it might even be a 3-point state this time, so that's a Florida landslide. And what happened? What happened is that Biden did do a little bit better in areas outside of Miami-Dade and then got crushed in Miami-Dade. And he didn't just get crushed because he didn't win as many Latinos, as suggested. He also didn't get the white vote in the numbers that he thought he was going to. So that was one of the polling misses in that sense. But when you step back from Florida and look writ large, remember, Florida was a must-win for Trump and not a must-win for Biden.
Yes.
And no matter how many times you tell yourself that, as you watch the Florida returns, which start blue and then turn red, you want it and then you can't have it. But it's still not a must-win for Biden. It's a must-win for Trump. Right. So we didn't get Florida. North Carolina, the polls said we're going to be close. It's close. It's still not called, but I'm doubtful that we're going to wind up getting enough votes in North Carolina to win. Georgia's a different story. The polls said Georgia was close. Maybe Biden even had a slight lead. And although he's trailing right now, there might still be enough votes in the Atlanta area for Biden to pull it off. Maybe. Unclear. There's still about 150,000 ballots outstanding, and these are mail ballots, and they should heavily favor Biden in a Democratic area that they're pulling it from, which is the Atlanta area. But, it's a 100,000 lead. I'm not sure if it's enough, but it's going to be very close enough so that the Trump campaign is quite worried about losing it.
Okay.
So we'll see. I mean, that doesn't mean anything until you see the vote. The other states that the polls said that we were going to win, we won. We won Arizona. John Ralston suggested that, the firewall is big enough in Clark so that we should win Nevada. We're probably going to win Nevada. I say probably, it's not called yet because we have a very slim, less than 10,000 vote lead. But the outstanding vote is mail-in from Clark and in general, and those should be Biden votes. So he doesn't have to win those votes by a lot, although he probably will. He just has to win them at all. And if that happens, we have Nevada. That means we have Nevada. We have Arizona. and I'll get back to Arizona. A very interesting thing about Arizona, I thought, is that when things went a little bit south for Trump in the middle of the night, because it looked all of a sudden like he might get, and this is the part I went to sleep, so I missed a lot of the drama
You
here.
did what?
But Wisconsin wasn't
Yes.
looking good for Biden, and then all of a sudden Milwaukee came in, and Wisconsin looked very good for Biden, and by now it looks like Wisconsin's ours,
Okay.
all right?
Yes.
And the same thing's happening with Michigan today,
Right.
and I think Michigan will be
good.
ours. That means
yeah.
that if you keep all the Clinton states, you add Arizona, you add Nebraska too, which
Yes.
I just sent you right now. We
do
happen to
that.
be winning in. Well, we're up 52-45. And you keep Wisconsin, which we're going to do, and Michigan, which it looks like we're going to do, then you get to 270.
Yeah.
That means we win.
Okay.
And not only do you get to 270, but don't worry about challenging faithless electors and stuff, or Trump trying to bribe one, because the Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. They already had that case before the election.
Who cares?
The electors
about that?
have to follow whatever the state says.
Yeah. Until
Which
they
probably Trump's mad
don't.
about now. He would have had that, decided afterwards
He
in his
may-
favor, maybe.
He may
But-
turn into a count every vote kind of a guy all of a sudden at some point.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why I think it's looking okay for Biden in that regard. But that's the intellectual version of
All
looking
right.
at what happened. The heart one, of course,
Right.
is that
This is where
it
everybody
was
realized
terrible.
it. Oh yeah, it was awful.
Because
It's also
we
everybody's
were
fault.
looking for a blue wave. It didn't materialize. We were looking for a repudiation of Trumpism. That didn't happen.
Yes.
We wanted everybody to vote. They did. That part's good. There wasn't a lot of violence
Right.
or manipulation
Happy.
of intimidation and such. So we were really happy about that. But this is what the voter wanted. And as somebody, I wish I could credit them, wound up pointing out, okay, so Biden winds up being president, but the Congress is going to feel a little bit more Republican and bold. And thank God they're not going to win the House. So you could still,
Yeah.
nobody can impeach Biden because it's our House. But they're going to feel emboldened. It's going to be difficult in that regard. And there's going to be, and Biden may be the perfect person for this, just as he was hired by the primary voters, the Democratic primary voters, to go out and win Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, which reminds me to tell you about Pennsylvania. And he may, in fact, have done his job and won those states, not
Okay.
Florida, not Texas, maybe Georgia. But he may, in fact, come through in the Midwest the way he was supposed to. And his personality and his style, like it or not, may be more suitable to navigating a difficult Republican Congress because he can't, at this point, be completely, totally confrontational. Maybe people would like that, but you can't if you don't have the votes. And so, he's going to have to negotiate with McConnell. McConnell can't do everything by himself. He's going to have to negotiate with Nancy Pelosi, who remains Speaker, and the Democrats remain in the majority. Difficult situation, not what we wanted. But so long as we wind up getting the White House, it's not the complete disaster that it otherwise would be because, frankly, Trump is a fascist, and this is how Nazi Germany started.
Oh, yeah, right.
People elected
those are
a
bad.
fascist.
Yes.
And he was popular. And dealing with the fact that a fascist is popular
And he had
is
unusual
something
hair.
that we're going to have to confront because a lot of people came out to vote and a lot of people came out to vote for him, despite everything.
Yeah. Right. That's true too. I guess that's also something that I kept thinking of in terms of polling and predictions in terms of I thought that people found themselves taken by surprise by the number of either first-time voters or infrequent voters who came out and voted for Trump. And I thought everybody was kind of adjusting for that, throwing out or readjusting their likely voter models to include people who seemed, I don't know, I guess it seemed
They
enthusiastic.
did. I mean, a lot of the likely voter models were exactly the same as the registered voters. And in fact, NBC Wall Street Journal poll didn't even use a registered voter model. So
Likely,
that
yeah,
part
okay.
was okay.
Yeah,
Again,
right.
looking at the polling hits that worked as opposed to the misses.
Okay, sure.
The national poll, when all is said and done, and California's counted, which is going to take a while, Biden's probably going to win the popular vote by about 5, which isn't all that far off from the 7.5 that the polls said. So I'm not worried about the national polls. They got that, in the ballpark. Not perfect, but not bad.
Okay.
Iowa. When Seltzer said that Iowa was leaning Trump more heavily than anybody else, and that Ernst was leading Greenfield, Teresa Greenfield, I got very despondent on Twitter because Seltzer's a really good pollster. And if she says that's what Iowa's doing and nobody else says that, I believe her, and she was right again. So that was a polling, wasn't a miss. That was a hit. That was a good one. In the sense, not good for us, but good in terms of accuracy.
All right.
And picking that up in Iowa gave us a clue that, okay, Michigan and Wisconsin and the Midwest, Ohio, are all going to be closer than we like. Otherwise, Seltzer wouldn't be picking that stuff up. Okay, fine. Individual states, as I mentioned, Florida wasn't that far off the mark in terms of the polling. It was a 2-point miss, but in the other direction. That happens. North Carolina, Georgia being as close as it was is exactly what the polls said. Texas, I think, got it more or less correct. A lead for Trump, which we wanted to be closer, but some polls picked up on exactly where that was. And the same is true with Ohio. Ohio was surprising strength for us, at least early. The suburbs really are rejecting Trump, but the middle of the state, the rest of the state, not so much. And the Kentucky part of Ohio certainly went for him, so we didn't wind up getting Ohio. Even the state polls, I could sort of explain away and saying, all right, not great. State polls often aren't that great, but nothing we're surprised at compared to 2016. The real miss, and the reason why everybody was so discombobulated yesterday, was district polling.
Well,
we put a whole lot of faith in district polling this year, not just us. It's not like we were in a bubble here. I'm talking about the Republicans and the Republican candidates who are running their own polls, the Democratic candidates who are running their own internal polls, all of that district polling that Dave Wasserman and the Cook Report and all those folks get to see, that was just totally wrong, all of it. That was the polling right. And because of that, the Republicans had no idea this was going to happen yesterday, any more than the Democrats did. So it's not like we were in a Daily Coast bubble and everybody else knew and we didn't.
We were just all stupid.
We were all stupid, and we were listening to what the Republicans were telling us about what they were seeing, and they were wrong, just like we were wrong. That's where the big polling miss was, and campaigns and candidates spend an awful lot of money on that polling, so something has to be done.
I guess so. I mean, my feeling, am I wrong about this? But it always seems like really the smaller slice you're taking, the worse the polling is. But I don't think have we ever had a year where they were
margin. It's that you're doing tracking polling almost every night, or 2 times a week, or 3 times a week, and you ought to be able to pick up movement or things that are happening, and we just weren't seeing it.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like we've never really had good polling at the district level. It's just always kind of a crapshoot, and I don't know, but. It's always existed, and I guess the people who look at it all the time for a living would know better, and they don't seem to be saying that it's always been historically unreliable, so I guess not. But I always feel like better. People point at that.
You consider it to be better, and again, you're supposed to take the gestalt of it. It's not like I'm predicting in this particular district, I know what's going to happen. It's more like I'm looking at 15 different districts. They're all moving in the same direction, and after that terrible debate by Trump, Biden had a pretty big lead in all of these things, and then we're doing tracking, and it's not like that is disappearing. People talked about tightening. The polls really weren't showing it nationally more than a point or two. They didn't pick up what this was, and that's the same thing with the states.
Did it tighten?
States are hard to read because you get 19 different polls from 8 different pollsters. Some of them are awful.
Yes.
Right. And so you don't really know what to believe. And so you go, okay, I believe Seltzer. I don't really believe Trafalgar, which it's going to turn out Trafalgar wasn't all that right either. But in the end, polling really has a lot of work to do because it didn't do the work the way it needed to do. The absolute failure, of course, were the prediction models.
Okay.
They were just like, forget about them, throw them out. Don't even do that anymore.
All right, I think I can get on board with that. I guess
They didn't help us.
no. And it leads me to the question. I thought I saw lots of chatter in the days leading up to the election about how things like the New York Times Needle were so annoyingly misleading and unhelpful that they weren't even going to do it this year. And then sure they did. And they did it in
They
all the
pulled
same
it back
ways.
for a couple of states, and turned out to be semi-useful. Turned out to be useful in Georgia,
All
for
right.
example. But the thing about Nate Cohen and the Needle is that he's always described it as experimental. Everybody understood
Okay.
that we're going to try this. Just like you try the low and high turnout models in polling.
But I thought that they had. I mean, that as maybe true. Did I misunderstand when people were saying, "Yeah, we're not going to do that this time"?
Well, they didn't do it for the election as a whole, and they didn't do it for every state, and they didn't do it, in a big scale. And for
do it
some
a
reason,
little
they
bit.
decided they wanted to experiment a little bit. They made some what they thought were good changes. And they wanted to bring it back and try it for a couple of states, so they did. So I don't mind them experimenting with that. I don't think anybody really took that seriously.
Oh, okay. Well, not
Right?
seriously, not
what
literally.
the upshot does, which is where Nate Cohen is, which is really helpful, and you can go to Wisconsin, you can go to Michigan, and especially you can go to Pennsylvania and pull up, and I have the Pennsylvania one there for you.
Oh, okay.
You can pull it up, and they'll show you where is the remaining vote. That's what is so helpful.
All right. Yes, but that's not a need.
And then you find out that the vast majority, the remaining vote is by mail, and that's why they suggest that Biden will wind up pulling out Pennsylvania.
Okay. And the rest of
So
the
we'll talk
remaining
about
vote
Trump's speech
is
after.
in the mood. Oh, yes. Okay, sure. We'll do that. Yeah, and in case anybody was anticipating something different, yes, he has declared victory and says that everything is cheating on Biden's
And the
part.
media said so what? He falsely claimed this. So we'll talk about how the media handled that.
You predicted that one right. Be happy. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. That might not be a bad place to jump in. I was just mentioning to Greg during the break, show's not complete unless someone says Abigail Spanberger, and it's really true. Actually, we do need to stop in on that race and in Virginia in general, just to talk about the level of confusion that's going on out there and how easy it is to either be led into despair or, I don't know, if you're a Republican, into premature celebration. Abigail Spanberger, I think, we've always held her out as a test case for a lot of things and as the genuinely most middle-of-the-roader there is. Twitter last night and still this morning, to this moment, my Twitter feed when I look at Virginians is filled with Republicans celebrating having defeated both Abigail Spanberger and Elaine Luria by astounding margins. They believe that she was wiped off the map, whereas the truth of it is, as you wait for votes to be counted, she's actually ahead at the moment. Spanberger. Is Luria also ahead at the moment?
Luria is ahead at the moment, 50.7 to 46.8 over Scott Taylor in the all-important Virginia 2. Mm-hmm. And Spanberger is very close.
Yes.
I think there's like 200 votes between them
with
Nick Freitas ahead, but I'm not sure that that's going to hold because there's 86% of the vote in, and the extra, I think, is suggested to favor her. So I don't know how that's going to go.
That would be understandable all by itself, or for people, speaking from braggadocio, we're going to crush her or whatever. But I mean, there are genuinely people out there saying, no, it went like 80-20 against Spanberger. She got crushed. She's been blown out of the water. And And they're just, I don't know, they're just not looking at the official results at some point. There were still people, Loudoun County last night, for instance, the chatter all night was Republicans, and even, people who are writers for the Washington Examiner, not like I would ever trust them, but people you would think would not want to get that far out on a limb, were out there saying, Biden lost Virginia. And Trump turned Loudoun red, and convincingly so. For the first time in years, it came out almost 60-40 Trump in suburban Loudoun County, and it didn't. It came out like 62-37 Biden. And I don't know what to tell you, but the results were in front of them, and they were still saying that. I found that astounding.
Right. Now, one of the really interesting things, I think, if you look at a state like Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania, I'm forgetting about the red mirage, because everybody talked about a red mirage. This is exactly what happened. Yes. The same day vote went red, but the mail-in vote goes blue and eventually catches up. And that's what's happening in all three of those. Who was it? Michael Steele called it the bricks in the blue wall there. Mm-hmm. And that, but as you watch those, somebody on Twitter noted that it isn't so much that we're a divided country. It's that we have these states which are unbelievably divided states. Like, it's not like there's a 50-50 Democratic Republican country, and we're wrestling with that. Mm. I mean, there is that, maybe slightly on the Democratic side. But Wisconsin is 50-50. Michigan is 50-50. Pennsylvania is 50-50. Ohio's 50-50. Texas, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, they're all 50-50 states. And how weird is that?
I guess that's pretty weird.
You'd think that, okay, well, this one finally turned blue like Virginia did. This one finally, turned red, but no, they're sticking with their 50-50. And so, it just makes the confrontation between what you want to do and what I want to do all that, more difficult, particularly because what you want to do is totally different than what I want to do.
Yeah.
So that's part of, what we're wrestling with this morning. So Trump takes this situation where the Democrats going to win the popular vote like 7 out of the last 8 times. Only won the presidency 4 out of the last 8 times, but won the popular vote more often than not.
Yes.
And say, okay, I won. And why did he do that? He did that in the middle of the night because Arizona started to trend against him. Wisconsin, I'm sure his numbers were telling him, was starting to trend against him. And he got upset about that and went out and said, I won, because, that's what you do. Which makes me think, of course, Joe Biden, once Wisconsin and Michigan are called, should go out and say, I won. I
guess he should, because then he will have.
Even without Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Right, but Pennsylvania will come in, but 270 is enough. And so, anyway, that's another story for another day. So Trump goes ahead and does this.
Literally, we're gonna have to wait for another day.
And here are 2 things that I think it's important, because the media got more or less completely right.
All right.
Thing number 1 is they really never made a big deal of the Hunter Biden stuff. That never turned out to be a major campaign issue. Not even under the radar. It's just not.
I think.
Okay, and thing number 2 is that Trump goes ahead and does this. And, I was looking at some of the headlines, for example. Let's see if I can find it in the Washington Post. Counting continues in key battlegrounds, but their story of the speech that Trump gave was Trump falsely asserts fraud, claims victory.
All right.
Trump blatantly seeks to undermine democracy with false claim of victory, attempt to subvert election is a different story written by Dan Balls. The main news story was Trump falsely asserts fraud, claims victory. I mean, that's exactly the right way to do it. And the networks didn't necessarily fall for what Trump said. They said, okay, Trump says that. Let's ignore it. Let's just go on and da-da-da-da. New York Times, with elections still undecided, Trump falsely claims victory. They're doing a very good job of putting the false part right out there.
Okay.
Which is important because, it's a big deal to falsely claim victory and try to subvert what's going on.
Yes, that's supposed to be sort of against our rules of some sort.
Right. Now, if I have any beef with how that's being handled, I think that should be while we're waiting for the votes.
Yeah.
Since you can't hurry up the counting, that should be the story. Trump is trying to subvert. It's not right. It shouldn't be accepted. What do the Republicans say about that? Of course, they are emboldened because they did better than they thought during the House and Senate stuff, as we talked about in the first segment. But nonetheless, you should get them on record. What do you think about this? And, establishing the fact that it's not right is like sort of really important. So when I was trying to sum up the pundit roundup this morning, I said, it certainly wasn't the election we anticipated. The underperforming Democrats had their expectations crushed, and the smoke is still coming from the rubble. And there was that bitter Florida loss and a string of underperformances in North Carolina, Texas, and Ohio. But Arizona was a bright spot. And because Arizona, plus Nebraska too, but that's hard to say, so nobody throws it in, because a win in Arizona may have thwarted Trump's ability to declare himself the winner. I just like to think of Arizona as John McCain's last gift to America.
Yeah, there were a lot of Republicans pointing fingers, particularly at Cindy McCain.
But America should point their fingers and say, you want to disrespect John McCain. John McCain had something to say about that. And John McCain's Arizona said to Trump, no, you didn't win.
Yeah. I guess.
And the fact that Fox
Democrats
was the first of the networks to call Arizona for Biden meant that MAGA Nation heard that. MAGA Nation heard that.
Yes. And Trump
the
reportedly furious.
That Trump tried to do for MAGA Nation were, pretty much set off course by the fact that it was Fox that called Arizona for Biden. And so, talk about cosmic karma. John McCain had a hand in all of that.
Yes, that's true. Right. And, I understand that sent Trump over the edge, apparently.
And that's why I think he went out and he made that speech.
That could be it.
Because I think, he lost his cool. He had a plan. He didn't stick to it. Just like Democrats didn't stick to theirs, because, that's what happens. But, he lost it, and he went out and he said, no, I won. And I'm taking it to the Supreme Court. That's why we did all of this. And said all the quiet part out loud.
Yes.
Which makes it work less effectively.
That's true, too. Yeah, right. And that part correctly predicted that, I don't know, I feel like there should be a bigger deal made out of the fact that everybody said that he would come out and prematurely
Axios reported Jonathan Swan got that scoop.
Okay.
And he said, this is what he's going to do. And that's what he did. And so we weren't shocked by it. We weren't surprised by it. And we weren't fooled by it.
It should be a prize of some kind for
something like that.
For him. All right. Let's see.
So another couple of things just to throw in here.
The Arizona thing.
I love this tweet from Horse Whisperer, who said, look, one thing I'd say to folks tempted to offload some of their angst by sniping at others who had far rosier predictions about results, don't.
Okay.
Expecting better of Americans isn't a crime. Believing in a great outcome isn't a sin. And they and we are suffering just like you.
That's true. Okay, that is a good quote.
So keep that in mind. I believed the polls, so I thought we were going to do better. But it turns out the polls are going to be right and Biden's going to win. Okay.
So you can take that.
Right. So I don't want to hear about, well, I would, and here's another point that Peter Hamby brought up, another journalist who follows this stuff pretty closely. Again, if you're stressing what's going on here, go look at Hillary's 2016 vote total in some of the outstanding counties that haven't been counted yet. Biden's all but guaranteed to outpace her.
Yes.
So that's why people thought Wisconsin would go blue, and I think it's pretty much established it will.
Yeah.
And the same with Arizona, and the same with Michigan, and the same with Pennsylvania, although those aren't declared yet, except for Arizona. But certainly raises the point that all those people who were dumping on Hillary for not doing as well against Donald Trump perhaps underestimated the forces in America that she was actually fighting.
Yes, that's another
because
picture that emerges.
Joe Biden is not, chromosomally the better candidate based on the fact that he's a male and she's a female. Did that have something to do with it? Sure, but Biden didn't have that, and it's still where we are. Maybe it's the difference between winning and losing.
Yes.
But it's not like, okay, just put a male up there and a bland white Democratic male and you'll just blow Trump away. No.
Okay.
Well, maybe Clinton just didn't run a good campaign. Well, Biden ran a superb campaign. And we're still looking at the results we're looking at.
True.
There are incredibly strong forces here, whether you want to call it white supremacy, whether or not you want to call it, the religious right and the evangelicals who want to, control certain parts of the state governments in order to make sure that their own view of, who can get married and who can't and who can get an abortion and who can't is a big deal to them. Those forces don't go away depending upon who the candidate is on the Democratic side. They're there. And, they need to be wrestled with, confronted, reckoned with, dealt with, not necessarily in a we need to destroy them kind of way. But, they're there, they're real. You have to reckon with it and wrestle with it and figure out what you're going to do about it. And that's true for Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden or anybody else who the Democrats put up. So you're going to see a lot of finger pointing because that's what happened. Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you? You should have done this better. You should have done that better. But there's a whole bunch of things going on that we haven't totally figured out yet, just like we haven't figured out the polls. And I think what it does do is it kind of exposes a little bit of why Hillary Clinton had such a hard time winning.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm thinking here now also of, I guess this still brings to mind for me, I'm stuck on what Matthew Dowd was focusing on, that there are counties in Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley, that are to him anomalous events with large swings in the population there. That
and also Miami-Dade, but we're veterans of 2004 and Kerry versus Bush in Ohio.
Yeah.
And why did that happen? And I'm not going there.
It is dangerous turf for sure. And I will say, even among the Democrats who prepared themselves for waiting out the full count of the results in terms of the presidential election, I guess maybe it didn't apply to every aspect of this, because there was certainly no hesitation in starting the finger pointing, which was real interesting to see happen as well.
It's amazing Texas got as close as it did, first of all.
Yeah, true.
And second of all,
and
we talked about on this show, and I got some interesting feedback from some of our Latine listeners about this. Good dialogue, not bad. But if you look at polling, for issue polling, not horse race polling, you find that surprisingly there are many Latine voters who consider themselves white.
Right, true.
And vote like white Trump voters in Trumpy areas.
That is, yes.
We talked about that on the show. And you know what? That's what you were seeing.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't come as a total surprise.
No, it shouldn't. And interesting. I wonder, what do you take there? Like, I'd love to talk to some of the Trumpy, the white Trumpy voters in these white Trumpy voter areas. It would be interesting to have a conversation with them about that too. If the numbers hold up as true and correct, and why not?
Right. And you have to remember there's different groups,
yes,
and you can't lump them all together. But not just that. There's a difference between first generation immigrant Latinos and second generation.
That's true too.
Where the first generation might be quite a bit more conservative, anti-communist, susceptible to
Cuban
the charge that you're like where you came from, and we don't want that. So that's my one issue. Mm-hmm. Right? If you know somebody who's from Taiwan, you may expect them perhaps to vote Republican because their one issue is China.
Yes, true. Right. That will happen. Certainly,
right. And it does. They can agree with you on every other topic, and that's their one issue. Yeah.
I guess I would be curious to know whether the white Trump voters in white Trumpy voting areas would accept the idea, a lot of their opposition to immigration in general, and their blanket opposition to immigration, immigrants, everything. It doesn't matter how you came here, we don't want you. And we don't want you because you never assimilate. Well, it's odd because they're now currently considering themselves white and voting for Trump. Is that the assimilation you were talking about?
That, right?
Yeah. No, I hate tacos, even though I actually love tacos. I don't know. I guess, that's just racism, and you just racist gimmitarian. Okay, fine. The facts say this, but screw you. I guess you're never going to get past that. But I'm curious to know whether there's anybody saying maybe they are assimilating.
As complicated as it is, we do know that you could never just fix everything by 4 weeks of advertising on Spanish language radio.
Yes, that's true.
Got to be a lot more than that.
Yeah, although you might be able to eke out a win, in which case it doesn't matter anymore. We control everything. But you certainly haven't. You certainly got more work to do to. I don't know whether it's complete the assimilation process or build bridges for any sort of dialogue with your neighbors. But
that stuff, honestly, is beyond my pay grade. And, it's not stuff that I should just be throwing around, given that I'm not Latino and I'm not from Texas and I don't live in the Rio Grande Valley. But I'm just saying it's complicated.
And so,
can be. If those are the votes, those are the votes. And I think we have to deal with reality.
It'll be very interesting to see how that gets explained and what people do about it. But it certainly seems fair to say, well, if you thought that all people of Latino background were going to vote Democratic just because, that's probably not wise. Now, as for putting your finger on why, that I think is going to require some treks to these districts and some real study. And I don't think that the answer that you might find if you're, say, more willing to trek to Miami-Dade and speak to the Cuban-American community, are going to be the answers of the Mexican and Latin American community elsewhere, in the North or the South. So, yes, good reminder, not a monolithic community, not just because of the way they voted, but in their explanations for their votes, and whether they're even willing to share that explanation with you at all.
Right. Which may explain that there really were some shy Trump voters, and they may be part of them.
Yeah. I was thinking last night, and this is a bit more complicated and fraught with political difficulty, but I did wonder whether if we're flirting with the idea of assimilation and shy Trump voting, and I'm sure for some this had to be a factor, because even among one distinct community of Latino pockets of population, there will be differences, because one guy votes this way for this reason and one woman votes that way for another reason. But yeah, I wondered about if you are, let's say, a Latin American, Central American refugee of sorts. You've fled political unrest in your own country, hoping to do better in the United States, and you come to this country and say, well, I have experience with dealing with autocratic dictators, and that's why I left, but I'm here now, and, well, what you do to survive there, if you're stuck, is you keep your head down, vote for the dictator, in the hopes that you will not be targeted by death squads for not having voted for the dictator. I guess maybe the same thought could cross your mind here. I'm a long way from Canada. Maybe the thing to do here is stay quiet, keep your head down, appear to be doing the things that the weirdo, violent people around you want you to do until you can make things better or escape or they fall off a cliff and, whatever. Maybe there's some of that going on. I mean, it's sort of, I can't impose that on anybody, certainly. And if it has nothing to do with the way you voted, it will be insulting to hear it. And if it did have something to do with your way of voting, you don't want to hear it, and it would be insulting. So I don't know who I can tell that to safely. But
the basic democratic dilemma is if you want to be decent and not play the, demonize your opponent or demonize something to make voters vote for you instead of them, then, you're playing by different rules.
Yeah.
So, very complicated situation. And that I think explains some of the voting results that we're seeing, not all of it. And there's still a lot to be looked at. In the meantime, update from Michigan, Joe Biden's taken the lead. He's now leading by about 7,500 votes or so.
Okay.
And there's still 10% left. As the New York Times puts it, Biden pulls ahead in Michigan. There's another batch of votes rolled in from Wayne County, where Detroit's located. That heavily Democratic area is currently reporting 70% of returns. That means that the results of the returns that come from there are more likely to be Biden. Mm-hmm. So I think he's going to wind up pulling out Michigan, just like he pulled out Wisconsin.
Okay.
In my pundit roundup, I had a tweet from Ben Wickler, and we were laughing about this a little bit. He quoted somebody who quoted him, and then he wrote this tweet that said, Green Bay and Kenosha results are in. Biden is now up in Wisconsin by roughly 20,600 votes. That number could wobble a bit, but there's no realistic path for Trump to pull ahead. So Biden's won more votes than any presidential candidate in Wisconsin history, folks. Joe Biden just won Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And underneath that, Twitter added a line in red that said, some votes may still need to be counted.
Yes. In fact, up at the top, there's a warning. Some or all of the content shared in this tweet is disputed and might be misleading about an election or other civic process.
Right. So, he just tried to say, hey, I think we won. And they jumped all over him and said, you can't say that.
You can
but he did.
Say that, and they let him say it. And
they let him say it, and they didn't take it down, but it was right. I just thought it was kind of amusing.
Yes.
And he wrote another version of that, which was taken down.
Oh?
And I asked him about it. And I said, what the heck happened there? And he told me on Twitter. It was kind of funny. I said something which used a quote of me, which then quoted me, but somebody else quoted me, and I quoted them. And this is like an MC Escher print.
I guess so. Yeah.
So I just took the whole thing down and rewrote it and just said, this is what I'm saying.
You can't, algorithms, they're not people.
Right.
It doesn't
exactly.
really work. Okay, well, that is kind of fascinating. And, he was being careful. And his own comments are very carefully crafted.
Yeah, they're quite
I'm there,
he's not claiming anything that he can't back up, but again, they did that.
I'm right. History has not recorded that we've hanged Donald Trump. I'm still entitled to say that.
Right. National security correspondent at Voice of America, Jeff Selden, weighs in and says, just in from the organization representing U.S. state secretaries of state on election 2020, quote, election night results are always unofficial. In the days and weeks to come, election officials will count every eligible ballot. And so that's the plan. That goes back to what Trump said or thinks he said.
Hey, the results of the Kentucky Derby are always unofficial, even though we all saw the race.
Right. And I've got some pretty good contacts in Michigan. And I think what's going to happen is that Biden's just taken the lead. As I said, I think that Gary Peters is also going to take the lead. And I just think there's not enough votes there for Trump to take the lead back. So I think those guys are going to wind up winning Michigan, I think.
That sounds good. I'll take it for now. You'll be back tomorrow, so we can.
So we'll see if that's correct. Per the U.S. Election Project, that's Mike McDonald, the 2020 election had the highest voter turnout in 120 years with 66.9%. The prior record was 73% in 1900.
Wow.
So that's pretty incredible.
Yes.
People voted. This is what they think. We have to deal with the fact that this is what they think.
Yeah. And a lot of it is not, you can say it's thinking because a human produced it, but it's not conclusive at this point. But they did vote that, I think, right? I mean, unless there's something really incredible happening that someone has yet to uncover. And that should be, no surprise. I mean, you've been living it in pandemic form for months.
So those votes will be counted. And, another piece of speculation you could throw in there is that, maybe part of the reaction to voting for Trump and not Biden is that people are just so sick of the pandemic that they just really would like to take their masks off.
Could
and
be.
This aspirational, hey, he's doing it, why can't I do it, was powerful enough to overcome the fact that, like, everybody around you is dying.
Yes, and there's a lot of powerful overcoming happening out there. One minor note in all of this, North Dakota, in their state legislative races, has managed to elect a Trump-loving Republican who I'm not 100% certain of his pandemic rhetoric, but being a big Trump supporter, I guess you can probably extrapolate, but elected him last night despite the fact that he died of COVID in October. So that's kind of an interesting. If you were wondering, well,
Yeah, that won't stop.
Whether they're ever going to say, when will COVID ravaged North Dakota, now the most infected place in America and among the most infected jurisdictions in the world, wake up and realize that Trump and Trumpism is literally killing them? And the answer is never. I will vote for the guy who said COVID is a hoax, who just died of COVID. Aren't you concerned that he's currently wrong about that? No, I am not.
Yeah. So, Mr. Parliamentarian expert, process guy, what happens if everybody running for, let's say, the state Senate winds up getting COVID and dying but getting elected anyway,
yes,
and you don't have enough for a quorum or a sufficient second? What happens then, huh?
That's a good question. I think at that point, they just switch. They take the neighboring state's legislature and swap it in, like changing the juries and the untouchables. Oh,
okay.
I don't know. That's a good question. If everybody's dead, everybody, well, one, what difference does it make?
Yeah. And can you sine die adjourn? I mean, what can you do?
I don't know. I think in this one case, I think we can look up and figure out, well, what do they do with this one seat? But North Dakota doesn't have a lot of people to spare, and they're losing them.
Yeah, you can borrow them from South Dakota, like right, the same state, right?
Or we combine the two finally into one state and just say,
well, the Dakotas, there's a precedent.
Sure, absolutely.
Just make it a territory.
Right. So
we can take your senators back, and then maybe things will get better.
That's true too. Yes. All right, and we'll have lots more to discuss about that. We'll come back tomorrow.
And more tomorrow.
Why don't you
we'll
do
talk
that?
about this. But these are the kinds of things David and I talk about.
Votes. Yes. So what else are we going to talk about? We could just stay here and say you're all doomed, but who would listen to that? Trump voters might listen to it. I don't know. We should switch sides. Think about that.
Take care and get some sleep, and I'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Very good. Thanks a lot, Greg. Catch up with you tomorrow. There'll probably be things happening. See, Abby thinks so too. Last minute vote. All right.
Interesting.
Yeah. What did I was just going to say. There's something else that I was reminded of by the Dakota thing. But okay. All right. Well, we'll be reminded of it tomorrow.
I do my best to summarize chaos.
Yeah.
Some days it's easier than others.
This is a tough day.
All right,
Abby, I agree.
Abby.
Okay. Very good. Woof. My oh my. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, maybe the most frightening prospect of all, carrying a second hour of the program on a morning like today, although we managed to do it in 2016, so I guess it should be possible now. I guess just to reassure those of you who are on high alert for fake news that this is really true, I will quote totally real news Fox 9 from North Dakota about that, in case you're very curious or want to look up for yourself. Who is this guy? North Dakota legislature candidate who died from COVID-19 wins election. I'm totally serious. The guy's name is David Andahl, Andahl. Has nothing to do with the Andals of the Game of Thrones, I don't think. But, if he grew his sideburns out in a weird way, I guess he could look like maybe a Game of Thrones dude. Anyway, yes, he's not a state legislator yet. He hasn't been sworn in. He won't be sworn in. He's dead. But it's a real thing. Dateline, for reporting purposes, Bismarck, North Dakota. I don't know whether he was a Bismarck local or was from elsewhere in the state, but a Republican candidate for the state legislature in North Dakota who died from COVID-19 in October won his election Tuesday night. I guess that's one of those things where they can't replace people on the ballot. I thought what was kind of fascinating about the circumstances here may or may not be outlined in this article. I read a couple of things quickly last night about it, but apparently he came down with COVID at about the same time that Trump allegedly came down with COVID, and well, they just had remarkably different outcomes in the hospital, and that could be attributed to a lot of things. One being Trump was faking his COVID infection. That's one thing you could attribute it to. Or the superlative care and easy access to cutting-edge experimental treatments that Trump was able to demand for himself. And by the way, in case you're tracking such things, we are now well over 20,000 people who have died of COVID since Trump on October 8th promised that he would immediately sign a so-called order that was going to make this miracle cure of monoclonal antibodies available. In the video, he said, to all of seniors in America, because they're vulnerable. Some people say you're not vulnerable, but you are. You're vulnerable. So am I. You remember the video. 21,000 plus people have died, I guess, tapping their foot, waiting for the instant miracle cure. And about 1.7 million additional infections detected via testing since then. So very shortly, I would say probably end of the week or sooner, we'll have nice round figures like 25,000 dead and 2 million infected since he said he had discovered the instant miracle cure that would put you back on your feet within a couple of hours, and everybody was going to get it for free. Still the most egregious and disgusting and depraved lie you could possibly have told. And but hey, I'm voting for him anyway. A remarkable phenomenon out there. Anyway, as for David Andal, election results in North Dakota showed the Bismarck area district, there's our answer, going to David Andal and David Naring. The district chooses 2 representatives, apparently. According to the Associated Press, Fox tells us, Andal died due to complications from COVID-19 at the age of 55 in October. He had been sick and hospitalized with the disease. Andal and fellow District 8 House candidate Naring won the Republicans' endorsements and voters' nominations to defeat one of North Dakota's most powerful lawmakers, Representative Jeff Delzer, chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. Andal won about 35% of the vote to win the seat. So maybe it was in the Associated Press article quoted here, perhaps, where they discussed it a little bit more in depth in terms of the timing and the odd paths that diverged between Andal and Trump. And I guess maybe it was this one saying that he was definitely a big Trump supporter, but some question as to where he was on, like, say, whether or not the pandemic was a hoax or whether or not mask wearing would hurt you. His mother, Andal's mother, Pat, says here, told the Bismarck Tribune that her son had been hospitalized with the coronavirus disease and died after being sick for about 4 days, but that her son had been, quote, very careful about the pandemic and was passionate about the idea of serving in government, which sounds nice, but I'm not certain what that means, very careful. Or whether he was an anti-masker or not is not discussed here. Although I think I did see an item that said in his obituary that the masks would be required at the funeral and memorial service. So I don't know whether that is a reaction to the way he lived his life or a continuation of the way he actually lived his life. But questions remain. Anyway, let's see. North Dakota state legislative candidate who won the June primary over longtime incumbent and target of Governor Doug Burgum has died of coronavirus. This was the AP report. Let's see. Anything else of interest here? Before, just by way of background here, let's see. Delzer was the incumbent who got pushed out. He was apparently on the outs with the governor there. And let's see. The primary drew the attention of the governor, Burgum, a Republican, who gave more than $1.8 million to a PAC that successfully targeted his seat. Delzer didn't advance to the general election, and he complained about the governor's intervention there. Before the 2019 legislature convened, Delzer led a rules change that shifted how lawmakers considered Burgum's proposals. Burgum later said he felt his executive budget had been tossed into the garbage. Interesting. So I guess he got angry about that and targeted the district and has elected a dead guy. And he can't serve because he's dead. And I guess missing from the early round of reporting on this is what in the world does North Dakota do next? I guess they just have a special election for this seat, and who knows when they hold it. But I guess given the governor's interest in replacing people in that seat, it would be soon. But by the way, I guess the thing to look for is Jeff Delzer was, of course, not on the ballot in the general election, but I suppose he can run for the nomination, if there even is a nominations process, in the special election. Wouldn't that be something to have him win his seat back? I guess that you could go far on that campaign if you were to win the seat back and tell the governor, it might work up there in conservative North Dakota to say, this is clearly a sign from God, Governor. You opposed me and you intervened in a manner I think is inappropriate, and you elected a replacement, and he was struck dead before he could take office, and I just got reelected to the seat you tried to push me out of with $1.8 million. Good job lighting that on fire. But we don't know that that's the direction it's going. I don't know. But given that it's 2020 still, I suppose that's entirely possible. Okay, let's see. Mad Hatter tells us, nothing gets definitively cleared up because, you can't speak for everybody here. But this is a good point. As a Tejano, an old-timer Mexican-American family, he says, we probably need to look at education levels with Latinos as well. He says Latinos, using the old form. Same as the white working class, probably eminently sensible. And, of course, there'll be 15 different cross currents, quote-unquote, explaining this. And it'll come down in some cases to individual decisions. It'll be very interesting to see how it shakes out. Like I said, no shortage of finger pointing, lots of progressive Democrats out there saying this is obviously, whatever this is, and whatever obviously means, and whatever a result means. This is obviously the result of not having a Latino candidate on the ticket, that the vice presidential selection was the wrong one because reasons, and having a Latino candidate would have changed everything, which I suppose is entirely possible. Anything's possible at this point. But, I certainly don't feel like that Kamala Harris was the wrong choice in any way. And, of course, when the counting is done, it'll be hard to argue with the fact that she's sitting in the vice presidency and say, obviously the wrong choice. Could it have changed voting among the Latino community? I guess so. I don't know whether that's... I don't know what to make of it, because on the one hand, here are people trying to be supportive of the community, saying, yes, they're a rising force in democratic politics and they ought to have been recognized and rewarded for it with a member of their community on the ticket. And I can get behind that sentiment, but then, of course, the competing cross-current, of course, of the other communities represented by Kamala Harris then saying, well, what, we're not part of the Democratic base and the backbone of it and didn't deserve this? Well, no, you can't say that, clearly. So it makes it's a difficult position to put progressives in, of course, to say that. And then there's also the question of, how reliable of a base are they if in this situation not having, there's only 2 spots on the ticket, in terms of the presidential ticket. Joe Biden's not going to turn Latino or black or any other of our power bases overnight. He's a white guy. So you're talking about 1 spot. Has to go to 1 person. Which one are you going to, which direction are you going to go? And I guess if in this situation, with this danger presented to us by this current so-called president if your votes in big ways really turn on being rewarded with a vice presidential nominee who shares your ethnic background. Is that the reward you want to give? Or, do you have to demonstrate the stronger long-term ties than that in order to win that prize? You know what I'm saying? If it really explains Latino voters turning their backs on the Biden-Harris ticket, that the vice presidential candidate wasn't themselves Latino, then I don't know what, is that a reliable constituency? Or is it really more likely that the people who are saying that are saying it in an abundance of exuberant support that they want to give to the Latino community, but from outside the Latino community, and be very woke about that, or what have you? And I suspect that, maybe that's it. I guess what I'm saying is I haven't heard a whole lot of Latino community leaders say, hell yeah, that was the reason that there wasn't as much of a vote from our community for Biden and Harris, and it won't be next time either, because screw you. That much I haven't heard. But I've heard plenty of people who aren't saying, yeah, we should have tried that. And I don't know. I don't think so. Not that it would have hurt, and not that it would have changed my vote, certainly. But I don't know. If you ask me if the record of sticking by the ticket, regardless of the personal representation, the record has been much better among, I guess, if that's a real thing, if that was a real reaction among the Latino community, then I guess you can say the record among the black community has been that much better, and that's where you should turn for your vice presidential candidates. I can't believe that that's really the way the vast majority of Latino voters processed things. They may have had bad reasons. They may have had terrible reasons for voting the way they did. But I don't know. Somehow it feels worse and more baseless to me to say it was that they didn't see themselves on the ticket and therefore wanted nothing to do with it. I think they may have had reasons. They may have been terrible reasons. They may have been fantastic reasons that we can, in fact, analyze from a progressive standpoint and figure out how to reach out to them and recapture them. And that would be great. That would be a huge relief. But I don't know enough to tell you what that reason might be just now. All right. Let's see. Skipping around elsewhere, taking a look at other things we're finding both last night and currently over Twitter. I see The Hill reporting that a Milwaukee elections official, where things are turning around, as Greg was telling us, Wisconsin looking much more likely to conclude finally that Biden won, similar to Michigan, but that the Milwaukee vote, which turned things around in terms of the count last night, Milwaukee election official given police escort to turn in absentee ballot info, which, you might have hoped wasn't necessary, but I'm glad to hear that it was there if it was necessary. And sometimes I think even when it's not necessary, you should just do it for formality's sake, just to sort of, lend official legitimacy to that part of the process. But I don't know. We'll see whether there was any specific need for it here, any specific threats. A Milwaukee election official delivered absentee ballot information with the help of a police escort early Wednesday as officials worked to report ballot results in Wisconsin amid a tight battle between Trump and Biden. Claire Woodall-Vogue, V-O-G-G, I don't know if I've pronounced it right, but executive director of the Milwaukee Election Commission, had told the press that she would take a police escort to the county courthouse to report the results of more than 169,000 absentee ballots collected in the city of Milwaukee. Officials worked into the early morning hours of Wednesday to process 169,341 absentee ballots returned to the city, with the Milwaukee County Clerk saying results wouldn't be expected until early morning. That's now. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel reported. There's an embedded tweet here about this event. We'll skip over it here for the moment. We finished right when I predicted that we'd finish, and did it with accuracy and transparency, Woodall Vogue told reporters when asked about the vote count while en route to the local courthouse. The mask-clad official, and how do we know it was her, if she was mask-clad? All right. Anyway, the mask-clad official was filmed, of course, holding a stack of papers as she climbed into the passenger seat of a police SUV for the short trip to report the results. The official headed out from the city's central vote count facility shortly after 3 a.m. local time. She deserves to sleep in today. And arrived a short time later at the county courthouse, according to local media. I guess this is the local media embedded right underneath. Meg Jones of the Journal-Sentinel with video of her arrival. Biden led Trump by about 10,000 votes out of more than 3 million ballots counted so far in Wisconsin early Wednesday. Milwaukee County reported 317,251 votes for Biden, compared to 134,355 for Trump, according to the county's website. Again, just to give you some round figures there to keep in your head. Milwaukee County, 317,000 Biden, 134,000 Trump. Votes from Milwaukee were expected to favor Biden, along with ballots that have yet to be counted in some other areas, the state Democratic Party said. Based on everything we've seen, those ballots will decisively favor Biden. Green Bay hasn't reported any results yet. When all the votes are counted, we're confident that Joe Biden will win Wisconsin, said the, of course, Democratic State Party Chairman Ben Wickler, for which I guess he can get tossed off of Twitter now. When the absentee ballots are counted in the remaining areas of Milwaukee County, Wisconsin is likely to be where I said all year it would be. Razor-thin margin. Former Governor Scott Walker had tweeted early Wednesday, and then he ate a ham sandwich and got a haircut. Wisconsin offers 10 electoral votes. That's kind of interesting way to put it. Offers it. Along with a selection of green vegetables and garlic whipped potatoes. So that sounds like, but I'll take it. Anyway, which those alone, of course, would not be enough for either Trump or Biden to win the election. Well, just 10? No, clearly. But how pivotal will Wisconsin be? We'll find out. Anyway, Trump became the first Republican presidential nominee to win Wisconsin since 1984, after it went for Democrats in 7 consecutive elections. However, polls heading into Election Day almost exclusively favored Biden in the state this year. So there you have it. I guess you can also file that under, thankfully, little, if any, actual violence reported at the polling places. I haven't been able to check in yet. Maybe we could, or one of you could, on what happened overnight and into the early morning hours on the streets of D.C. and New York, where everybody boarded up in anticipation of violence. Although, I guess, if you are waiting patiently for the vote to be counted, perhaps you also have to wait patiently for the violence to erupt. And I guess when things move from individual candidates and spokespersons for these candidates and surrogates making various claims to the mode in which officialdom is putting its imprimatur on what they're calling final, or at least tentatively final results, I guess you might perhaps expect to see any chaos and disruption erupting then as opposed to now. But, pardon me, so far no word of widespread chaos or destruction on the streets anywhere either. So that's good news. There were reports early in the day, I think, was it in North Carolina, where a guy had to be removed from the local polling place. He showed up to vote, cast his ballot, was open carrying his guns with him at the time, and then decided to loiter hanging around the polling place because it was something that he felt like he had the inherent right as an American to do. They removed him from the premises. He later returned, and then the second time was arrested. But, so why he did it and what the point was supposed to be, no one ever found out. They just arrested him and took him away, and that was that. And I think there was also news somewhere along the line that somebody who had brought their guns with them to the polling place had accidentally shot themselves as well. Nothing major. I guess they were apparently, according to the reports, able to drive themselves to the hospital, which isn't necessarily really the recommended way of getting there. But I guess if you're bleeding, minutes count. No word on what actually happened. And no word, I don't think, in any of the reports on whether or not this person was able to cast their ballot before taking off for the hospital either. I'll have to search through my timeline for that one. I'm pretty sure I just retweeted that one under the gun fail banner. But I'll look it up and see if we can't include the details in the roundup today, just so you can go ahead and see it. By the way, still a pandemic happening, as I mentioned to you, and the numbers with respect to what has happened since watching the president promise to cure everyone instantaneously with his miracle injections. But story remains largely the same in terms of where in the United States is the outbreak the most egregious in terms of day-to-day new reports of new infections per capita. And the answer is still the same. The upper Midwest and the Dakotas, which we spoke about just a moment ago. All right, let's see. I'm not finding that gun fail story all that easily, but I'll make a note to self to take a look around. Okay. Oh, I've lost my note paper. So note to self, get more note paper. All right. Real froggy this morning. All right, let's take a look around at other things that I pocketed or was tweeting about last night that need to be shared with you. Yes, now I remember one of the other items in the Latino Hispanic community section of the news. Interesting observation made here by a source that I don't necessarily trust with the conclusion, but an interesting thought. This is somebody who is actually a former chief of staff to Marco Rubio, just to give you the proper grain of salt with which to take his conclusion. It's Cesar Conda, who tweets this interesting possibility. Our fellow Americans in Puerto Rico voted to join the USA. Is that like actual results of yesterday's voting? He's got a tweet in here from Walid Shahid of the Justice Dems, saying that 53% voted for statehood in Puerto Rico, and I don't know how binding a vote that is, and under what the situation was, and under what pretenses the vote was taken, but an interesting result nonetheless. But Cesar Conda noting that yes, they have voted to join the United States. Given Donald Trump's stunning support from Hispanics, as he puts it, and we're still waiting to see how stunning it is and what it might mean, there is no reason for Senate Republicans to fear adding Puerto Rico as a state. Puerto Rico could very likely, he says, add 2 Republican senators to Mitch McConnell's ranks. Very interesting. I mean, I guess it's possible. I mean, it's not unheard of by any stretch of the imagination for Republicans to be sent off to Congress on behalf of the voters of Puerto Rico. It's by no means a lock forever. And I guess in light of the results yesterday and our uncertainty about what's driving voting decisions among the majority of Hispanic and Latino voters anywhere, It's entirely possible, and you should keep an eye out for it, and it's not necessarily any sort of panacea, but an interesting observation, if only because we expect that Republicans will continue to resist that. And I know that among the many plans that people had for a Biden presidency and Democratic majority Senate, which, is still, well, it's looking increasingly unlikely, even if the Georgia race in the runoff section goes our way. But that was among the many plans, including, of course, the expansion of the courts. That's a real downer to have to deal with, too. But the possible admission of D.C. and Puerto Rico as states and changing the makeup of the Senate. And interesting, one, that you should note that it could happen that those seats go Republican, and two, that Republicans might think that they would go Republican. Will that change their approach? Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Some, late breaking additions to the mix from Greg. A conversation between Ben Smith of the New York Times and Zeynep Tufekci. Interesting conversation, and it goes like this, and now we have to try and figure out what it actually means here. Ben Smith tweeting, "There's a huge part of pro-Trump Twitter seeing dark patterns in the late arriving votes. That's no surprise, of course, we expected them to do that, but it doesn't really have anywhere to go without Fox." And so here's the question: what is Fox doing? Zeynep replying here, that's one of the biggest stories. No, Fox has jumped ship, or at least appears to be trying. And so what exactly is happening here? And I guess I'm trying to figure out, are they saying here that though pro-Trump Twitter sees dark patterns in the late arriving votes, if Fox doesn't endorse the idea explicitly that there is something nefarious going on here, then the conspiracy theory goes nowhere and the results stand and Biden wins and that's that? Or are we saying here, I'm actually not 100% certain. Are we saying, is Fox jumping ship from its Trump support, or is Fox jumping ship from its earlier calls, like Arizona, for Biden, and reversing course in preparation for helping Trump and pro-Trump Twitter make these claims of dark patterns in late arriving votes? I'm not 100% certain which one it is they're going for here, but given who's having the conversation, my guess is it's the former and not the latter. Very interesting. Let's see. Also, I guess it always would be wise. It's always wise to check in to see what Zeynep is saying about anything. And let's see, at the moment, some of her latest Twitter feed entries are retweets from others commenting on her earlier tweets, I guess. These are Berisha here, retweeting Zeynep and saying, this is such a good point. Everyone is asking, why were the polls wrong? There is a much more important question. What's the impact of feeding the public wrong information during an election? And that's always been a question on our mind here. But Vizar, having retweeted Zeynep's earlier tweet, saying, yep, the polls were systematically wrong again. Also, the forecasts, which led to a sense of certainty of a Biden win, since their fragility to even tiny shifts is not understood well, also likely affected the outcome. More Republican turnout, more ticket splitting, and referring here to one of Dave Wasserman's tweets, if I'm not mistaken. And where's the... redistricts tweets. He's noting here this 2 hours ago. So two things. Biden is well on his way to flipping Michigan and Wisconsin, in addition to Arizona and Nebraska 2nd District, and is doing well enough in Pennsylvania's completed counties to be on track to win there. And two, polls, especially at the district level, have rarely led us more astray, and it's going to take a long time to unpack. So not dissimilar at all from what Greg was telling us about district polling. So let's see. Now, Zeynep also includes this screen grab of I don't know what, but let me just take a quick look here. In 2020, it's even harder to rely on polls or previous elections. On top of all the existing problems with surveys in an age of cell phones, push polls, and mistrust, we're in the middle of a pandemic. What do the unprecedented early voting numbers mean when polls don't necessarily stop polling those who've already voted? How do the early forecasts that run for many months before the election and are even more uncertain affect those who vote early? Will the elderly at great risk from the pandemic avoid voting? How will voter suppression play out? Will Republicans end up flocking to the polls on Election Day? These are big unknowns that add great uncertainty to models, especially given the winner-takes-all setup of the Electoral College, where winning a state by as little as 1/4 of 1% can deliver all its electoral votes. There's an even more fundamental point to consider about election forecasts and how they differ from weather forecasting. If I read that there is a 20% chance of rain and do not take an umbrella, the odds of rain coming down don't change. Electoral modeling, by contrast, actively affects the way people behave. Interesting, and a good subject of study for behavioral economists out there. Hint, hint, in case any are listening. I don't think so, but not the one I'm thinking of anyway. Yeah, well, interesting and worth keeping an eye on. But I guess one thing that you might want to take away from all of that is Dave Wasserman's assertions that Wisconsin and Michigan are going as expected, and they are trending more and more towards Biden, and it looks like they'll end up in the Biden column after all, and Pennsylvania on track eventually perhaps to do the same as well. So the Electoral College victory making itself more apparent. All right, let's see. Other things that I stored away for us in Discovery. Let's see. We'll just give you the headline on this one. You likely already know it's the case. But just in case you didn't know, the Hill's headline, all four squad members easily win re-election. That's how they got elected in the first place. They come from districts that overwhelmingly support them. Guess what? That's kind of how it works. But in case you were wondering, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Ayanna Pressley, and Rashida Tlaib all won re-election easily Tuesday night after fending off conservative challengers. I understand that Republicans actually spent an awful lot of money trying to unseat AOC, and it was all burned. Let's see. The Republican challenger was John Cummings, raising over $10 million to try and unseat her. She easily won the race with just under 75% of the vote. So it's nice to see that money lit on fire, though there's no end to Republican funding. They just steal it from elsewhere and move it into the races that they want. Let's see. The rest of the squad also made out very well. I guess $10 million, of course, pales in comparison to, say, I think I understood it to be $88 million raised in the effort, similarly focused effort, I think, to oust Mitch McConnell from the Senate. Just national activists from the other party hating that person and wanting to donate funds to the effort to unseat them, but it was just unlikely to work. And it's played out just that way in the Kentucky Senate race and in the New York's 14th congressional district race. Similarly, of course, for Ilhan Omar, I think very widely targeted as well. Perhaps somewhat to a lesser extent Presley and Tlaib, but they've each had their time in the hot seat and expected probably to see a lot of national money show up to oppose them. Didn't work. Let's see. And I also understand a potential fifth member of the squad, although I can't assign her to it. She has to volunteer for it. But a lot of people are speaking in these terms. Cori Bush, according to this article from St. Louis Public Radio, putting it this way, Cori Bush becomes the first black congresswoman in Missouri history. And that's always great news all by itself. But in case you hadn't kept up on the race, Democrat Cori Bush, a nurse and political activist from Florissant, yes, on Tuesday became the first black woman from Missouri ever elected to Congress. Unlike her August primary contest against longtime 1st District incumbent Lacey Clay, Bush's general election against Republican Anthony Rogers and Libertarian Alex Furman was never in doubt, but you may not have paid that much attention to it. Maybe because it was never in doubt. The district, which takes in all of St. Louis and portions of St. Louis County, is the most Democratic congressional district in the state. AP called the race shortly after the polls closed at 7 p.m., so pretty quickly done. So widely expected to perhaps align very well politically and in terms of her activity. Not just voting, but her focus and her issues may very well align very closely with the rest of the squad. Let's see. And I guess we'll borrow these paragraphs to explain why. Let's see. Her 2018 campaign against Clay gained attention after Bush received the backing of then Representative-elect Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. But Clay's historical strength in black portions of the 1st District led to a comfortable victory. And after Claire McCaskill's defeat in the U.S. Senate race, Clay was arguably the most powerful Missouri Democrat left in office. But 2020 was different. Bush, who has been closely aligned with Bernie Sanders for years, emerged with a better funded and better organized campaign. She received backing from outside groups that supported Democrats challenging longtime incumbents from the left. And when the votes were counted, Bush prevailed, thanks to a stout margin of victory in St. Louis and a much better performance in black portions of the district. So I think some excellent news for the progressive wing, and I think that probably includes all or most of us listening here. And if you really want to, you can take some secret glee in her closeness with Bernie Sanders as well. It's at this point in time, that will be permitted. So go ahead and enjoy it. Let's see. Other news from around the country. I don't think we have. I didn't get an updated answer about this one. But as of knock off and go to bed time last night, I had this from the Fresno Bee. Devin Nunes just barely pulling ahead in his re-election bid against Phil Arbayo of in his California district. And does he pronounce it as Arbayo? I'm not 100% certain whether he anglicizes that pronunciation or not. But election officials have not declared a winner there yet. So apparently pretty close, although they're getting close to finishing up the counting. 97 or so % of the vote counted there, but closer than expected. And I guess for much of the night, it was sort of seesawing back and forth. So I guess there was some chance of being rid of Devin Nunes in the midst of all this, which would have been fantastic. But hey, you never know. I'm glad, though, to finally see some newspaper reporting of these things. I mentioned earlier to Greg that it was baffling if you were trying to figure out the election on Twitter last night or even this morning. Again, I watched people right here in my own neighborhood insisting that Loudoun County had flipped red, and it was in actuality, even at that time, the results were available on the county elections, Board of Elections page, listed as 100% of the vote counted, that the county had overwhelmingly voted for Biden, and they certainly returned Jennifer Wexton to the House with very little doubt in an early call in the night. There were people tweeting late into the night that Mark Warner, Republicans, insisting Mark Warner had lost in Virginia, and they called the Warner race. Polls close here at 7 p.m., and I think, by 7:15, maybe even earlier, they had said, yeah, Mark Warner won. There's just no question about it, and there never was any question about it. But there are people at 3 a.m. tweeting, this is all a lie, and the newspapers and networks are going to have to reverse their call of Virginia. So there's a lot of, crazy still in circulation. Speaking of other, I guess we'll switch gears just a little bit to another crazy story. Not electoral results, but certainly related to the election. We watched this one play out yesterday during the day. A federal judge issued an order to the U.S. Postal Service ordering, in fact, that postal inspectors or possible designees of postal inspectors be dispatched to, I think they identified mail facilities, as I said here, mail facilities serving 15 states. And I think they approached this from a statistical point of view. They basically took a look at, I guess the plaintiffs in the case, took a look at the mail sorting facilities where, serving areas where the lowest number of ballots requested, absentee mail-in ballots requested, had actually been returned, and saying, hey, what's happening here? What happened to those ballots? Were they never delivered? Were they delivered and returned by the voters and then never delivered to the boards of election? What's going on? And there were some where the percentage was really egregious, and some very high percentage of ballots that had been requested just are unaccounted for. And so the judge ordered postal inspectors to go to the facilities serving these areas and sweep through. I want you to conduct a search. Find any ballots that may still be languishing in these postal facilities and get them the hell out of there and move them to the boards of election so that they can be counted. An eminently reasonable order, quite honestly. I mean, should have been done earlier, but what would be more reasonable than saying, Postal Service, do your job. You've got these ballots. They can't be left sitting there when they're ready for delivery. And I think the numbers they were talking about were in excess of 300,000 ballots had been checked in, scanned in by the Postal Service on their way back to county boards of election, and then no exit scan, no tracking whatsoever of what happened to these things. So, reasonable conclusion, some of them are sitting in postal facilities somewhere, so I order you to go look for them. And then, by nightfall, there was a very interesting response from the Postal Service, the Department of Justice, letting the judge know that they were, in the words of, I think, Kyle Cheney tweeting this around, they were turning down the order. And I've never heard of turning down. I've heard defying the order, disobeying the order, being in contempt of the order. Of course, that's a decision the judge could make in any of these cases. But I've never heard of turning down the order. Nah, bro, I really didn't want to do that. That doesn't really usually appear as an option. So that was rather remarkable. The Washington Post here reporting it this way. USPS disregards court order to conduct sweeps in 12 postal districts after more than 300,000 ballots can't be traced. A federal judge had ordered mail service and law enforcement agents to comb processing plants for votes as delays continue. Jacob Bogage or Bogage, I don't know how he says it, and Christopher Ingram, probably Ingram, reporting on this one. The Postal Service turned down. That's why Kyle went with that phrasing, and I'm not certain how they came upon that phrasing. Turned down a federal judge's order late Tuesday afternoon to sweep mail processing facilities serving 15 states, saying instead it would stick to its own inspection schedule. Oh, interesting. The court order came after the agency disclosed that more than 300,000 ballots nationwide could not be traced. U.S. District Judge Emmett G. Sullivan of the District of Columbia, kind of a hard-nosed judge from time to time, on Tuesday had given the mail agency until 3:30 p.m. to conduct the, quote, all-clear checks to ensure that any found ballots could be delivered before polls closed. His order affected 12 postal districts spanning 15 states. But in a filing sent to the court just before 5 p.m., Justice Department attorneys representing the Postal Service said the agency would not abide by the order to better accommodate inspectors' schedules. I'd love to know how that argument went. Attorney John Robinson, writing for the Justice Department, noted that the daily review process was already scheduled to occur from 4 to 8 p.m. on election night. Okay. Given the time constraints set by this court's order, finished by 3:30, and the fact that postal inspectors operate on a nationwide basis, defendants were unable to accelerate the daily review process to run from 12:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. without significantly disrupting pre-existing activities on the day of the election, something which defendants did not understand the court to invite or require. That's an interesting interpretation. The agency disclosed Tuesday morning that 300,523 ballots nationwide had received incoming scans at postal processing plants but not exit scans, leaving voting rights advocates worried that hundreds of thousands of votes could be trapped in the mail system. Sullivan denied an emergency hearing request from the NAACP, which brought the lawsuit against the Postal Service, with a group of voters and other civil rights groups, but he told the Justice Department attorneys to be, quote, prepared to discuss the apparent lack of compliance with his order at a previously scheduled Wednesday conference. That's today, of course. This is super frustrating, said Allison Zeevy, an attorney representing the NAACP. If they get all the sweeps done today in time, it doesn't matter if they flouted the judge's order. They say here they will get the sweeps done between 4 and 8 p.m., but 8 p.m. is too late, and in some states 5 p.m. is too late. The Postal Service began election mail all-clear sweeps in January. Agency spokesman David Partenheimer wrote in an emailed statement. Interesting. This, of course, was to search for misplaced political mail, such as campaign ads and election mail, like ballots and ballot applications and voter registration information. I guess there wasn't quite as much in January, but since Thursday, he said, agents from the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, the agency's law enforcement arm, conducted daily reviews at 220 ballot processing facilities. Inspectors walk the facility and observe mail conditions and check daily political and election mail logs. In the past 14 months, Partenheimer said, the Postal Service has processed more than 4.5 billion pieces of political and election mail, up 114% from 2016. Ballots will continue to be accepted and processed as they are presented to us, and we will deliver them to their intended destination. Timely ballot processing scores, which indicate the proportion of ballots sorted, postmarked, and transported within the agency's 1 to 3 day service window, worsened in the run-up to Election Day, according to data the agency submitted to the court. In 28 states, election officials must receive ballots by the end of Election Day to be counted. Voting and postal experts say the mail agency should be able to process 97% of incoming ballots or completed ballots sent to election officials, but data shows the Postal Service missed that mark 7 out of 8 days. And in the past 5 days, processing scores dropped from 97.1% on October 28th to 89.6% on Monday. The Postal Service, of course, did not report Sunday data. And then a chart here, which actually points to The November 2nd number being just 89.6%, right? But that in 17 postal districts that cover 151 electoral votes, Monday's on-time processing rate was even lower, 81.1%. Sullivan ordered officials from the Postal Inspection Service, the agency's law enforcement arm, or the Postal Service Office of Inspector General, its independent watchdog, to inspect all processing facilities in the districts of Central Pennsylvania, Philadelphia Metro, Detroit, Colorado/Wyoming, Atlanta, Houston, Alabama, Northern New England, that being Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, Greater South Carolina, South Florida, Lakeland in Wisconsin, and Arizona, which also includes New Mexico, by 3 p.m. Lawyers for the Postal Service cautioned that the ballot processing scores might be unreliable. The figures do not include first mile and last mile mail handling steps that could add time to deliveries. The Postal Service has also encouraged local post offices to sort ballots themselves and make deliveries to elections officials rather than sending the items to regional processing plants. More than 65 million Americans have voted using absentee ballots, according to the U.S. Elections Project, and more than 27 million mail ballots remained outstanding. Experts are encouraged by high ballot return rates in swing states that could soften the impact of mail delays. In Michigan, 85.6% of absentee ballots have been returned. In Wisconsin, 89.7% returned. In Pennsylvania, though a little lower, 80.9%. Even so, the Postal Service continued Tuesday to try to track down more than the 300,000 ballots it said had entered processing plants but could not be traced. I'd like to know where some of those are. The agency cautioned that number was likely high and that clerks were hand-culling ballots at those facilities to expedite delivery. However, officials said they did not know how widespread that process was and how many ballots could remain. In 17 postal districts and swing states that account for 151 electoral votes, more than 81,000 ballots untraceable. In Los Angeles, 48,120 ballots are missing, the most of any district. San Diego was next, with 42,543 unaccounted for. At this point, said Zevi, we don't have any way of knowing if those ballots are of concern or if they aren't. Sort of a bad position to have to be in. All right, I'll jump out of that story for now just to make you aware of its existence. We'll see. I don't know if that it's going to be pivotal in the outcome of any state elections or the national election. Just sort of interesting to watch the idea that I'm going to turn down that order. I'll be interested to see how they explain themselves today and what the judge opts to do about it. I don't know. I find that just kind of amazing in itself and possibly very dangerous. Okay. Let's see. A couple other comments on that story, which I'll skip over. And let's see. At this point, it's now, as I said, a bit of we just do the waiting game and see how the counting is going. We've come pretty much to the end of our time here together, and of course, time to switch over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next, and see how he approaches today's elections mess. Let's see. Okay, this we covered already from a couple of days ago, and I guess just sweeping down the activity of last night on the Twitter feed to see if there's anything else that we can add to our roundup here other than the fact that Donald Trump is on his Twitter bender trying to execute the process by which he plans to, convince people to reverse the results and see whether it works. Here's some interesting news from out of Mississippi yesterday. I guess we can take good news where we find it. Who's this? Sam Hall, formerly a executive editor with the Clarion Ledger in Mississippi, brings us this little bit of good news. A picture, I'll have to include the tweet for you, will be the new state flag of Mississippi. Voters overwhelmingly approved it. It's a great day, he says, for the state as we move forward from a divisive emblem that now rests in the past. You can imagine what divisive emblem that was as part of the Mississippi state flag before, and now a very pleasant magnolia flower motif. That's good news for Mississippi, and in the midst of all their Trumpist voting and race relations difficulties over the years, it's nice to see that they decided to move away from there. In hyper-local results here in Virginia, a lot of ballot questions around the state in various counties around the state where Confederate memorials remain in place at the county courthouses. Every single ballot measure asking whether or not they should rid themselves of the Confederate monuments or allow them to stay, guess what? Unfortunately, they allowed them to stay. So that's pretty disappointing too. And I don't know. We'll see whether any of those statues are removed by some other method in the near future. Wow. It's just disappointing considering what could have been done there and the victories that could have been won. Lots of discussion too about the various drug decriminalization measures around the country, including some wacky ones. I believe Oregon decriminalized possession of all drugs of every possible kind.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
As I mentioned, West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next, and who better to cover what was going on the West Coast than our own West Coast cook? Let's see. Trump, of course, declaring victory before all the votes counted. Shockingly disappointing, but they'll cover it with their own exclusive angle coming up next. Stay tuned for Justice. We'll see you tomorrow.